Hello, I am Reverend Irene Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to Generationally Speaking. Here at the table, we come and we discuss life issues, no matter what they might be. As we sit at the table with each generation, we all learn, we all grow, we all are inspired.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Generationally Speaking.
If somebody's getting ready to join in and work with you, you've got to ask them, I think, two questions. What are you willing to sacrifice and what are you willing to risk? If you're not willing to sacrifice nor risk, we're not against you. Just keep doing what you're doing. If I ask you, we're going to a meeting, you tell me you got to go to a sorority meeting. I say, oh, fine. Tell everybody at the sorority meeting we said hello. You can't be with us.
Right.
You're not willing to risk nor sacrifice. So what we were willing to risk our bachelor's degrees, our undergraduate degrees. We were willing to risk going to jail. We were willing to even risk some of our own colleagues, our own peer students saying things. Now, here's something that I think is very key. The president of Tennessee State, the faculty members on it, they were behind us all the way, even though they could not publicly do it because it was a state system and the president could get thrown out, Tennessee State. So they had to, but they were right there behind us and we knew it. And I knew it much, much later when I got out. I wondered, where were they? Because you come to class, but if you missed the class or you were locked up or something, they said, well, why don't you take home and do this? And you watch out, you take care of yourself. Now you know you're gonna get in a lot of trouble, your parents, and they did like, and it was kind of an understanding, but they were down inside because many of them had gone to schools in the North and now they were back giving us a subliminal kind of teaching and giving us the courage to go on. And sometimes they got a bad rap, saying that some of the presidents got a bad rap. They're Uncle Toms and they don't care. No, they knew exactly how to spur and condition us, yet keep the school open because those folks were mean. They'd have gotten rid of the entire administrative staff had they thought that they were influencing us, had they thought that they were, encouraging us to go down and be January 6th insurrectionists.
Yeah. Well, when you think about this word influence, certainly you had to have been a young student who had influence over a number of other students and the movement and the impact that you all were making in that community. Because you mentioned Samuel DeWitt Proctor. And for those of you who don't recognize that name, if you go down to Virginia, you'll see the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Seminary. You'll see that name. And then you mentioned Sergeant Shriver, that they came to you, this person came to you and he spoke with you and he asked you this series of these three questions so that he could open your mind to sit and hear what this person had to say. And when you sat and he talked about the Peace Corps, what was it that he said to you that said, yes, this is something that I want to be involved in? Did you think it was going to take away your impact on the civil rights movement in the States as you accepted this position with the Peace Corps? That's a lot.
Going back to your generational speaking, Sam Proctor, even before that, you think about generational speaking. I was 18 years old. John Lewis was 20. And there was an old man, generationally speaking. He was 34 years old. And he was giving us advice. His name was C.T. Vivian.
Wow.
C.T. Vivian, who, of course, the last 20 years of his life was in the pulpit with me. I did his eulogy even. But I was 18. John was 20. C.T. was 34. And he said, look out for this, do it. And we sit there at his feet. So when Sam Proctor came in, Sam Proctor was an old man. He might have been 39 at that time. And so intergenerational. So it wasn't that he was convincing me, his speech wasn't to convince me to go to Africa or to stay in the move. But the three questions he raised me, if you don't know anybody, you're broke, you've never been anywhere, why can't you listen to somebody?
Yeah.
And when I listened to what this black man was saying about this white man, and it wasn't about the white man, his program was, how can you make an impact around the world now that you're getting ready to graduate from school? Mm-hmm. And what Sam Proctor was saying, you're going to jail or you're going to be dead here. And now you can broaden your base and come back. And when you come back, guess what? They will have saved $2,000 for you. You would have traveled around the world and you know some influential people. I said, that makes sense. And I introduced him to the student body, and that was in 64. And the next thing I knew, I was at the first time in the history of the United States of America, they put a Peace Corps training program on a Black college campus called Central State in Wilberforce, Ohio. Right. And here we were, and there were 9 Black people in that program with all these whites. They were coming from schools I'd never heard of. Brown, I didn't know anything about Brown University, all these East Coast schools, but these were whites who had the time to, they call it going abroad. To us, it was going back to, what's the word I used earlier? Survival. Mm-hmm. We were just, and when it got, then once I got there and I began to see, then my whole life began to change, and you're seeing the results of it today talking with you.
So you went, you joined the Peace Corps, and then eventually you ended up at a university in Switzerland. As an African American, did you have any trepidation about enrolling in the school, and how were you received? Was it totally different from, what you had known in these yet to be United States of America?
When I had never heard of done anything about Switzerland. A young man named Tom Napper Morgan, he always considered, he went into Peace Corps with me, but Tom was, most people are always a little more progressive than me, a little more avant-garde. He always wore a tam and smoked Camel cigarettes. And so when we finished, after he said, man, I'm going to Switzerland, and then I'm going to France and sit on the left bank and look at artwork. But I couldn't get my passport to get back to America. So I said, I'll go along with you. We ended up in Switzerland, and I was sitting at an outside table, and some tall white guys came by with a basketball, bouncing a basketball. And I was sitting there with Tom, drinking a glass of wine, laughing, 24 years old. And they came, and so I just jumped up and grabbed the basketball and started playing with it between the legs. They said, monsieur, c'est une bonne tip, bien avec moi dans le champ. And they would say, I said, what y'all talking about? They were going to play an outside basketball game, and the Swiss are very precise. Just for a pickup game, we call it sandlot. They had a timer, referees, everything. And so I went to play with him. I told Tom I'll be back, and I went on down and played with him. And in the game, I shot 56 points.
Wow.
And they said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm on my way to France. They said, would you stay here? I stayed there for a year and a half. And while I was there, I met a young lady named Muriel West, who had attended Fisk University. She was a foreign language major, and she was there for the summer living with Madame Genier. And I met her, and then she came back to America. I tried to come back to America, but my passport was lost. I couldn't get in. But I communicated with her, and she was working for a company called XEROX or something like that. And then I found out later that was called Xerox in Manhattan. So we got married, and we're married 54 years. And but I had to stay in Switzerland. And then what happened when I finally got back, some people helped me get a name to get back in America. And a guy helped me get back to America with I won't say a different kind of passport. And I had to go to Gary, Indiana, start working in the steel mills. And there was a guy there named Dick Hatchett. He was the first Black elected to the mayor. And they were putting together a new group of politicians called the Black Caucus, and Charles Diggs and all of them. And I was working in the steel mills in Gary. But I started going to the meeting down there, and Fannie Lou Hamer came up from the South. And I'm sitting there, and it reminded me 6 years ago, I was down there in Nashville. And now the Black Caucus has been formed with Rangel, Charles Rangel, and Dingle, and all of that. So I got right back into it. But while I got involved, I enrolled at Illinois to get another master's degree in psychology while I was there. And then finished that, and then joined the Panther Party there in Chicago with Fred Hampton. Yeah. But again, remember this, even in the Panther Party, when we were bringing it to the school, we were feeding families.
Yes.
And I would see things they were saying on TV about the Panther Party. I couldn't believe, I never carried a gun. I never did this on the West Coast. Huey and Eldridge and all of them, Eldridge and Cleveland, we were in DeKalb, Illinois, using the mantra, but we were feeding families, finding milk and all of that. We call them early morning breakfast feeding programs for children going to school. So all of that, those are the things that add into it, but the foundation started there. So it's going along. It's not like you sit down and plan out your life. I think that, what is it, Jeremiah 29:11, the plan?
Yes, yeah. I know.
The plans I know.
I know.
So I think that is the way that has happened. And God, since God did not give us the power of fear, but of a sound mind,
Mhm.
you eradicate the fear of all that's going on. So all that went on in Nashville as it began to unfold with the Panther Party and going to school, what next? And it was all just kind of a evolution. America and our educational system does not teach us to be comfortable with evolution. I mean, allowing things to happen in your life, a kairos versus a chronos moment. So we have to be on charge of everything. No. I mean, me speaking to you today, this is a kairos moment. I had no idea, but you open yourself up and then you go and then you learn something about where you are, who you are, and how does that impact on what your overall goal. Mine is very simple. How do I continue to use things in my life that will uplift those that I'm called to serve?
Wow. So, I don't know what it is to be. I'm thinking about, I don't know what it is to be outside of the country without a passport to get back in the country. But you made good use of your time.
Yeah.
And so finally you get back and you're working and you have all these other social issues that you're involved in. How then do you get to ministry?
All right, I got to ministry. This is really deep. Again, not the one thing in my life that I never wanted to be was a minister. I didn't like why? My father was a Church of Christ minister. I saw how members of churches treat first ladies. I saw how members in the house lie and cheat. I saw how a trustee, an elder at this one church jumped all over my sister who was flying for TWA serving alcohol. And he told my father, you need to disown your daughter for serving alcohol on a plane. And he was an alcoholic. Mm. I saw the hypocriticalness in churches. So I never wanted to have anything to do with preaching the gospel. I see them 1 minute they talking about Jesus, the next minute they over here doing this. And rather than condemn, I stayed away from them. So that's why I became a psychologist. My first 2 degrees in psychology. And then my son was being born, and he was having convulsions every night. And we put a bathtub of water in the bathtub of water. And when his temperature went up, we cool him down. Right. So I'm sitting there, and a guy came to our house trying to sell us on Amway. And so my son was making some noise. He's like very small, and we had to rush him to the hospital in DC. And I sat there with my daughter, who was 2 years old at the time. And I said, God, if you get me through this, I want to keep my son. I'll do what I can for you. I'll do what I can for you. And that was like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. About 4:30 that morning, a lady came in and said, we want to let you know that your son passed. And I'm sorry to do that. And I said, well, it's all right. But at that time, I told God, whatever you do, whether he makes it through the night or doesn't make it through the night, I will serve you. So I didn't have one of them cataclysmic, God came out of the sky and grabbed me while I was shooting dice on the ground and threw my bottle away, or this calling. As I said in seminary, I was the only one there without a calling. I had a compelling. There's a difference between a compelling and a calling. I was compelled to do, and I kept my promise. So I'm sitting there, and the lady came back downstairs. No, she was getting ready to walk off. She said, you're taking this so well. I said, well, I've got to. And then she said this, Mr. Brown, I'll be right. I said, I'm not Mr. Brown. She said, aren't you Mr. Brown? I said, no, I'm Durley. She came back down. She said, about 2 hours ago, your son's fever broke. I said, what? And I was confused between deaths that the lady had just told. She said, no, it was Mr. Brown I was looking for. I said, no, I'm the only one here. About a few months later, I enrolled at Howard University School of Divinity with Dean Jones. Yeah. And the rest is pretty much history.
Well, let's just talk about the rest, pretty much history, because you God has just allowed you to interact with some of the giants in the struggle. And so as you're starting out preaching, what was the focus of your message? Because now you have the civil rights in that is a passion that was part of your formative years and shaping you. So when you mount the pulpit now and you know what you've seen in the past, how did that change you as you mounted the pulpit and what you spoke to the people that were in your congregation?
You know, that's a very, very, very powerful question because you use the term, how did it change you? I'm wondering, and I never thought about this until just now. I wonder, does anything change you? And I'm a play on words. You mind me playing on a little word? Or does it transform you? Because I was always a pretty decent person knowing right from wrong, but I kept going through transformations. And so I didn't ever really change. I never went out and beat up people. I never cussed out women. I was always respectful of folks. I didn't hate white people. I was a pretty decent kid that grew up in a Christian home. But I kept, and change could be, I matured, I learned more. And if that is, I was a change. The song says, Lord, I know I've been changed. The angels in heaven, because they know my name. Lord, I know I've been changed. But I was transforming now. What transformed me, each of those events, Hassan being alive, going to Howard, Bernard Lee, who was with Dr. King when he was killed. Bernard Lee was in the class with me. Things like that. And so the ministry, even to now, years and years later, is how do I take all of the incidents that God allowed to happen in my life and continue to build upon them to where it is today, that your faith has to be something that moves the needle in a very positive way to uplifting God's people. And if you're serious about that and you've made a commitment to that, then expect it to continue to happen. I never thought, and let me bring in all of those times. And as I know, on January the 5th last year, my wife died after 54 years. And I was praying about that. I said, oh, this is a prime of our life. But she died. And I had to really grapple with saying, like, God, I'm on your team. I've been shooting the ball a long time for you. Why would you do this to me at the time when we're ready? But it happened. That was chronic lymphatic leukemia in the last 5 years taking care of it. But all through that, it was preparation, going through that change, going through that transformation to now. And then after she died, 8 months later, the boy that we thought died, he died at 47. Buried him only 3 months ago. Now, so I'm still in that transforming. Now, what has that done when you come to today in the ministry? Now, preachers are coming up saying, Durley, we talk a good game. We talk about faith. We talk about hold to God's unchanging hand. We talk about the sovereignty of God. But how could I have buried my wife and then come back and bury my son and be the grandmother and the grandfather and the father and the mother because my son's wife died only 3 years before at 44. So I looked at all that. So what did that do? It's now got me to a point where they're coming and say, man, you don't even have to come in and preach, just wave your hand because we see that God can carry you and we need that. So maybe all of those things, whether they're the highs and lows and the marches and the jails or the books or all the 25 years at Providence or at Ebenezer. I was at Ebenezer before I was at Providence in Atlanta. Now, all of that is added up to how I faced something 18 months ago and then something 12 months, a few months ago. So I think that's when you say change, that's the transforming to come to where it is today. And I'm glad that it's changed, but I believe that on any given moment, I could easily drift back sitting at that counter in Nashville if you get too tight on me.
You know, I'm thankful that you used the word transformation, because as we're journeying through life and as you've journeyed through life at different places of life, I don't want my audience to think that it was always good, but that you had some struggles that you had to experience. You had some lonely hours. You had some times of prayer and then some more prayer. How did you, and what did God do to protect your heart so that you wouldn't collapse under what could have seemed, and even like you said, your wife and your son? How does God protect your heart so that you don't give up in the struggle, that you don't say, I don't think I can do this anymore?
I think that's the very question you asked. I asked yesterday. I am still. And here's the way I get through this. I had to look one day at the reality and I said, I don't like this script. I don't like this play. I don't like the acts in the play. I don't like anything about it. But I love the script writer. Ooh. The script writer has never written a bad script. The scriptwriter Kim brings in a Tony and an Oscar every year. But you got to know, now I had a choice. Do I get out of the play? Do I tear the script up? Do I walk and sit in the corner and get depressed and down and doubting? Or do I say, I know that the scriptwriter has never written a bad play. So I say, God, I can't handle this. I don't like this script. He said, well, look, do you want to leave the play? No, I don't want to leave the play. Yeah, I've seen too many times since ancient times all the way up through, even when the script that Coretta had to deal with, and now his name, Martin, is all over the world. I had to look at that when they put Nelson Mandela in prison. It was a bad script, but the scriptwriter redeemed him and brought him back and made him the president. So now, even today, as I speak to you, I don't like the script, but I love the scriptwriter. And God's given me a script. So I got up this morning and I looked at my script and said, you'll be with Irene Smith today. I say, God, thank you for my script.
Praise be to God. I'm about ready to shout right now. I'm trying my best.
But you're pulling this out of me in a very profound journalistic way that I have not come. I'm still transforming. I'm still in the field of transforming.
Yes. Yeah, and I believe that will help. I know it helps me, and I know it will help my listening audience to understand that the script writer is where we got to keep our focus, and not the script that we're in right now, because that's going to change.
You know, there's a story told about Martin Luther King. Remember, they came in and they were taking him down to Reedsville prison in the back late at night. And I had to draw from that story. So I read it. I think it was in one of his writings. And how did he, like many of us, a group of people come in at night, throw you into a paddy wagon late at night, and they put a German Shepherd dog in the back with you. Ooh. There was a dog put in the back with Martin King. He tells the story. And it was in the back. And they said, how did you survive that ride to Reedsville with a dog sitting there, a snarling dog? You know what he said? Watch this. I didn't focus on my fear. I focused on the dog. What are you focusing on to get you through those tough moments? What are you focusing on when doubt and fear, anxiety and depression? What are you focusing on? Jesus. You can focus on, I can't make it. When I get to that point, I've said it last week, this week, I get to a point, I might say it today. I will say it today. God, I cannot handle this today. So many things, I can't handle it. I know you've placed it in it. And I used to think, particularly when you've been a psychologist, you figure you can work with all the mental gyrations in somebody's mind, all of that. No, sometimes you have to just act. We have to say, I can't handle this. You got it. And mentally, your thought and vision, handing it over to an almighty, sovereign, good, great scriptwriter who brings home the Tony and the Oscar. And then at the end of the day, when you get up on stage, say, I want to thank those that were, say thank everybody. I want to thank my director. I want to thank my musical director. I just want to thank God for getting me through this day. Give us what? This day. Our daily bread.
Yeah. Amen. Speaking of which, now you're serving as a board member of the Interfaith Power and Light. And remembering, as you remember God's command in Genesis 1:28, giving man dominion over the earth. And so tell us a little bit about what
how God worked that. I chair the board for 5 years.
Okay.
I'm the chair of the board. We're in 40 states, 22,000 houses of worship, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist. And in the climate change era, that's not us. We're still in survival. How do I pay my rent? How do I fight police brutality? But 7 years ago, a white woman came to Atlanta and she was getting ready to deal with teenage pregnancy here. And she was getting ready to have a large meeting that was going to be chaired by Joel Osteen and a bunch of white evangelicals out at the airport. And so they were beating her up, saying that she was talking about abortion. So somebody here said, why don't you go get Dr. Durley and take him out there with you to all these white evangelicals? So I went out there to the airport and she was talking about teenage pregnancy among young Black girls and could they come in and help and donate? So one person said to me, is he your bodyguard? And I said, I didn't know who he was talking about but I'm tall. So is he your body? I said, no, I'm just accompanying her. And I didn't really know her. I just met her. She said, no, but I'm here to share. So the white preacher said, well, if he's got something to say, he needs a PowerPoint to present to us. I said, no, I'm not saying anything. I could say something. He said, well, if you could say something, why don't you say something? So she said, no. So the guy who was over to me said, come on and say something. So then another one said, he's got to have a PowerPoint. So I said, I'll say something. So when I got up there, Irene, this is a true story. I did this. I'm pointing to my power right now. It never goes out. It doesn't. I don't need it back. Let me share. And then I went on about why are we doing it? When I finished, she said, I want to introduce you to my husband. The lady's name was Jane Fonda. Her husband was Ted Turner. Ted was in the environmental movement. Next thing I know, Ted and I like this. And then he introduced me to Sally Bingham out in San Francisco with Interfaith Power and Light. I got involved as the only Black person. Then I began to compare the civil rights movement with the environmental movement. We all have a constitutional right to clean air, clean water, all of those kinds of, we have a right to that. So next thing I knew, I'm the person now on the front. And so Otis Moss III had me out there. Then Ambrose Carroll, then Al Sharpton called. And they said, man, you are the only one out here talking about the Black folks and the environment and carbon dioxide in the air. That was 10 years ago. So now that's how I got into that. But you remember all along, speaking on teenage pregnancy with Black girls. And now here it is. I just spoke last week at the Council of Foreign Nations on why we pollute the least, but we suffer the most when it comes to carbon dioxide, when it comes to asthma. Down there in Florida right now, 85-mile Cancer Road, where petroleum companies are polluting the air and the water. So now, was that a plan? No. When I left Providence, I rewired. I didn't retire. I'm rewired. I don't use the word term retirement. I use rewired. I'm rewired. I left there at 71 years of age. I'm 80 now. That was 9 years in there that I've been concentrating on tying in with pastors all over, that we've got to look out for the asthmatic conditions. We've got to look out for the cancerous condition. Therefore, this heat wave that's going on right now, even as I speak to you, we suffer the most and pollute the least. Therefore, right now, that is kind of where I am now. I didn't plan this. I didn't look out for this. And I believe if people open up their hearts and open up their minds and open up their spirit, when they pray and whatever God puts on your plate, begin to understand God is preparing you for what is needed at that particular time, whatever your gifts are. Whatever your gift. Some of the greatest preachers, their gifts were prepared in prison. I don't know. Paul was one of them. I don't know. I could be wrong. But, and then in the middle of all of it, Jesus said, going through the eye of a camel, the needle of the eye, that's a joke. So Jesus had a sense of humor. Every now and then, I can't stand a dead, dry Christian who God is blessing. They said, and the Lord has made a way out of nowhere, blah, blah. Oh, no. Neither will our young people. We're competing with the Atlanta housewives in the pulpit. So we've got to still put the truth of what God can and will and has done, along with the scriptures, the inerrant word of God, and yet and still give it some wrong word. I was gonna say give it some color, but give it some levity, give it some enthusiasm. You know what the word enthusiasm means? In theos, in God. That's what enthusiasm means. How can you be in God and not be excited? Yeah. And you might not be in the pulpit, you might be a usher, you might be putting the communion trays together. And when we do that, when we all come together, what a time, what a time.